Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 129. Entering the tower in pursuit. The female commander giggled as she turned to look back. Her face was twisted in a hideous grimace, veins crowded her face. Her flesh was twisted at an odd angle as she said, "You're a Yaoguai yourself, yet you're afraid of Yaoguai." When the Carpiao thought about it, it did see the logic there, so it shut its mouth. It understood that this woman in front of it was a painted skin Yao. Zhao Zilong had heard that the painted skin's form was that of bloody flesh and that they needed to peel off the skins of humans to cultivate with. And in the Carpiao's eyes, seeing a person with their skin peeled off was akin to watching a human peel the shell off a shrimp. It was very odd. "My name is Liang Danhuo," that painted skin Yao said, setting its skin to dry after peeling it off. "Why don't you call me Danhuo? How about you? What are you called?" The Carpiao fell silent again. "Am I beautiful?" Danhuo leaned against the lounger, idly pulling over a piece of cloth and draping it over her chest, revealing her body dripping with fresh blood. Her lidless eyes spun around this way and that. The Carpiao watched for a while, before Danhuo pulled out another cloth box, opened it and started to eat what was inside. The Carpiao tried to take a peek. Danhuo then asked, "You want some?" And saying this, she immediately rose and came over, opening the cage. The Carpiao immediately turned its head to look around, wanting to take this chance to escape. Danhuo, however, said, "Don't bother running. In this world, where can you be freer than here?" And saying this, she handed the snacks she was eating to it. The Carpiao looked down, only to see that it was a human pinky, and it was once again frightened. It trembled as it replied, "I won't eat that." "Who exactly are you? Where is this?" "This is the home of the Yao," Danhuo said. "Some other day, I'll take you to meet the bosses. Since you're already here, you might as well stay. With how you look, I imagine you've suffered quite a bit as well. You look very pitiful." The Carpiao suddenly had a bit of an urge to let loose and wail, even if it was going to do so right in front of a human-eating Yaoguai. In this moment, this bloody painted skin Yao didn't seem like a Yaoguai anymore, but instead a messenger sent down by the heavens to rescue it. It was also at this very moment that there was a pig's squeal outside. The sky had already darkened, and Danhuo said, "It's time to eat. Shall we?" And saying this, she opened a closet, inside which hung neatly arranged human skins. She chose a different female skin to put on, and she said to the Carpiao, "Follow me. The estate is large, so you'd best not get lost, otherwise I won't be able to find you." The Carpiao was still feeling apprehensive. Danhuo pushed the door open, revealing that a light rain had been falling amidst the gloom, and she turned back to ask, "Are you not hungry?" Aside from staying, the Carpiao didn't have anywhere else to go. It was also hungry, and its wounds hadn't healed yet, so it finally changed its mind, limping out and following behind Danhuo. "I don't eat humans." This was the first sentence that the Carpiao had spoken to Danhuo after it arrived here. "I am a good Yaoguai." Danhuo replied impatiently, "Even if you wanted to eat humans, you wouldn't have the skills to do so." The Carpiao followed Danhuo through the corridor. This time, Danhuo had taken on the form of a woman who was over 50, yet still retained her graceful bearing. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves, and she wore a bright red robe. The guards and servants in this estate seemed to watch Danhuo with fear, and when she passed by, they did not dare to look directly at her. The Carpiao noticed that every blade of grass and every tree growing here all grew in odd shapes. The grapevines twisted this way and that, brandishing their claws and fangs, and the grapes that grew on them varied greatly in size. The leaves of the scholar trees had jagged edges, like monsters that would snatch people up in the darkness and eat them. The two sides of the corridor were lined with hideous reliefs, and the screens in the hall were covered with art of Yaoguai eating humans. The lighting, however, was bright, lending the scenery in a manner an odd feeling of being in an alien world. In the depths of the hall, countless monsters were roaring. Dan Huo led the carp Yao into the hall, and all of the Yao gathered, looking in her direction. The carp Yao's heart thudded at that, only to see that there sat a horrific, huge beast emitting black chi. That was an incomparably massive and luscious, billowing with black smoke. The last time the carp Yao had seen him, it had been when an Lushan had entered the city. At that time, Hong Jun and the rest of them had all headed out in full force to watch an Lushan enter, while the carp Yao had taken that chance to report to Yang Hong. After it gave its report, Yang Hong let it back out again and ordered it to go back first. It just so happened that an Lushan was passing through the city then, and the carp Yao ducked behind Yang Hong and caught a glimpse of him from afar. An Lushan looked as heavily built as he had been before, but the flesh across his body looked charred and blackened, and it gave off a rotten smell. The golden rings, tortoise shells, and other accessories winked with light from time to time, and they looked as if the gold and silver, the gems and pearls, had all been tossed into a huge cesspool, glimmering as they moved with the quivering movements of An Lushan's body. After losing the protection of the sacred flame, An Lushan, with his mortal body, had no way to fend off the corrosion from the devil chi, and as of now, his entire body was slowly rotting away. A white light flashed, before turning into a circular ring, which spread out into the dark space around them. It hummed as it went, shooting off into the distance. Hung Jun staggered, and he felt as if he was being pressed up against the ground. He immediately reached out to grasp around wildly, and he roared, "Ah!" Subconsciously, he reached out, only to instantly grab another person's arm. When he looked back, he saw the unconscious form of Qiu Yangxi. "Yangxi!" Hung Jun shouted anxiously. For some unknown reason, Qiu Yangxi was already completely unaware of what was happening around him, and the two of them began to slide along swiftly thanks to the momentum they had built up. With one hand, Hung Jun pulled out a throwing knife, and he turned to slam it into the ground. That throwing knife, however, rang loud and clear upon impact, and no matter how hard he stabbed, it didn't catch. This world was empty and vast. The only thing that existed was the ground beneath his body that gave off an icy chill. They slid along faster and faster, and Hung Jun stabbed down hard time after time, trying to slow their speed as fast as he could. In the end, a clever idea came to him, and he swiftly gathered up the 4 throwing knives into one, which he turned and stabbed into the ground. There was a crisp sound like that of silk being split, and the immortal slaying throwing knives, after combining into one weapon, cut open a 3-inch wide slit as easily as if it was slicing through tofu. It did not, however, slow their downwards progression at all, so Hung Jun lifted the glaive and swiftly twisted it around. With a crisp ding, the glaive turned, the back of the blade instantly embedding itself in the crack. That opposing force jolted Hung Jun, and he and Qiu Yangxi almost went flying out. Thankfully, he was very strong. If it was a normal person, they would definitely lose their grip, with 2 people who weighed over 300 jin together, on top of the momentum they had built up. Hung Jun only felt a great pain from the muscles and tendons in his arm and shoulder, and he hurriedly called up the protective armor of the pentacolor sacred light, forcibly stopping their slide down. It was only now that he looked back up, and finally understood where this icy chill was coming from. He and Qiu Yangxi had just so happened to land on top of a vast piece of ice some tens of thousands of years old, and this ice was situated at the summit of a tall mountain. The 2 of them had been sliding down the smooth, glossy surface of the ice. 5 zhang below their feet was the boundary of the ice, and beyond the additional square zhang of icy spikes, there was a gaping, bottomless abyss. Hung Jun dangled at the very end of the ice, one hand holding onto Qiu Yangxi, the other onto his glaive. He couldn't move up at all, nor could he shift even the slightest bit down. "Yangxi!" Hung Jun shouted. Qiu Yangxi did not move at all, his arm caught in Hung Jun's hand as it was, as he dangled there unconscious. Where is this place? Hung Jun seemed to remember vaguely that before Qiu Yangxi entered the dragon-subduing tower, Xia Yu had suddenly appeared and ambushed them. It was also then that the teleportation array had grown unstable, and with a huge boom, had sent them to this odd place. There was no light of the sun, moon, or stars here. The sky seemed to be nothing but a vast emptiness, and amongst that vast emptiness glowed an odd kind of light. There was no wind blowing around them, and the entire world seemed to be incomparably odd. This was the inside of the dragon-subduing tower, Hung Jun thought. That was something that he could be sure of. And in this place stood a snowy peak some tens of thousands of years old, which was very different from what he was imagining. He didn't know who had created this tower, but the inside actually consisted of such a vast space. He cried out to the heavens, but they did not respond, and he called out to the earth, but it did not react. What was he supposed to do now? Hung Jun saw that across from the layer of ice, a little bit lower, there was a little bit of cliff that jutted out by about 3 kun. He figured he might be able to jump over, but that cliff was a good 10 jong distant. All right, he might as well give it a try. Hung Jun sucked in a deep breath and kicked off his wooden clogs. They plummeted towards the abyss, and there was no sound of them hitting the bottom for a long while. Thankfully they hadn't fallen down there, otherwise they'd definitely have broken every bone in their body. What Hung Jun was the most dejected about in his entire life was that he couldn't fly like Qing Xiang and Chongming. Perhaps they purposefully hadn't taught him because they didn't want him leaving Yejin Palace. But this had caused him no end of trouble. With his feet bare, he kicked off the ice a few times, beginning to swing along in a small arc with Qiu Yangxi in tow. At the same time, he looked towards the lower cliff edge, using his own body weight and Qiu Yangxi's to start swinging in earnest. The glass bottle that contained Yeming's ashes was positioned right over Qiu Yangxi's chest, and it was right then, as they swung particularly tumultuously, it swayed left and right in front of Qiu Yangxi's chest. A good half of the bottle had protruded out, and as the arcs grew bigger, it was starting to tilt, and it slowly toppled before falling into the abyss below. In the early morning, Li Jinglong dashed out, coming to a stop in front of the tower. Qiu looked towards the platform. The dragon-subduing tower was enveloped in the pale light of dawn, and the devil Qi that Xia Yu had brought with it previously had already completely vanished. Did you see it? Li Jinglong asked, turning his head back. Who saw it? Qiu replied, it's truly gone into the tower. The last scene in Li Jinglong's memories of that dark night was Xia Yu flying towards the top of the tower, before vanishing entirely. Xia Yu went in, chasing Yangxi, Atai said. That's the only possibility. Everyone was at a loss for what to do. Mo Rejin frowned. Why is it that when Xia Yu appeared at the Flowing Clouds Mountain Villa, the villa owner didn't notice it at all? How could I have expected that? Qiu protested. Logically speaking, it wouldn't have returned at all. What prisoner, after escaping from their prison, would willingly run back inside? Li Jinglong said, it knew that after Qiu Yangxi obtained the ashes, his goal would be to bring them back to the dragon-subduing tower. We were truly too careless this time. It had not been carelessness, Li Jinglong had thought of this possibility as well. If it wanted to snatch the ashes back, its best bet would have been to hide itself along the path that the exorcists would have to travel along, so taking a ship down the canal to Hangzhou was actually a trap that Li Jinglong had set up. After all, if he did so, they might have been able to lure Xia Yu out, then get rid of it for good. But Xia Yu hadn't shown up at all during the trip, and when they arrived in Hangzhou, Qiu Yangxi and Li Jinglong both figured that since Xia Yu had been gravely injured in the last battle, it was probably not coming again. After entering the Flowing Clouds Mountain Villa, Li Jinglong thought that they were safe. After all, this was the home of the dragon-subduing immortal, so how would Xia Yu dare to enter? If this was a usual day, Qiu would not have let his guard down so completely either, but because he had suddenly met the son of an old friend, all of his attention had been focused on this. He had also assumed that Xiaoyu had been gotten rid of entirely, so he didn't ask any further. And so, Li Jinglong ended up having his boat capsize in the gutter, and the reason for it capsizing was because his cleverness had been his own downfall. He had been outsmarted by Xiaoyu. Oh well, Li Jinglong said. There's not much of a point in looking into this. Can you bring us into the tower? Qiu Qiu replied, I cannot enter, otherwise, as soon as the path opens, the Jiao horde that has been waiting for a long time will attack wildly. They will take this chance to attack the entrance, so I must stay outside. I can, however, send all of you in at once, but Li Jinglong, do not forget, time passes differently inside the tower and out of it. With that reminder, Li Jinglong instantly remembered this severe issue. How long will it take to find Hung Jun and Yangtze, and complete the seal? Li Jinglong asked. I don't know which level of the tower they landed in, Qiu Qiu mused, stroking his beard. Logically, they should have been on the 9th level, but the magic here shows clear signs of disorder. If, after you enter, you are unable to find them on the 9th level, you'll have to spend time searching level by level. The amount of time that would take is not something that I can estimate. The size of every level, Li Jinglong said. As quickly as you can. There's no need to rush. Even if you dally 3 days before entering, no more than a K or 12 will have passed inside, Qiu Qiu said. Think it through first. With a wave of his sleeve, Qiu Qiu caused light and shadow to intertwine, forming a hazy image of every level of the dragon-subduing tower. The 9th level is the smallest, Qiu Qiu said. It is about an acre in size. It is where the profound heavenly dragon-subduing array is, as well as where the dragon god of the dragon-subduing tower, Yeming, used to live. Morrigan let loose a breath in relief and said, that'll be easy to search. No, Qiu Qiu said. The 8th level alone is 9 acres of land in size. Everyone. The 7th level, 81 acres, Atai murmured. Almost a whole Cheng. Qiu Qiu said, that's correct. The 6th level is 729 acres, the 5th. Hold on a second, let me do the math. And saying that, he squatted down, picked up a tree branch, and began to scribble away in the dirt. Stop calculating, Li Jinglong didn't want to hear this information. I'd better calculate it, Qiu Qiu said. Either way, even if it takes me a day and a night, in the tower. Everyone begged internally for him to have mercy on them. 43,046,721 acres, Qiu Qiu proclaimed, 1K later. That's still okay, Li Jinglong said, almost fainting from the shock. It's about the same size as Huainan. How is that okay? Everyone shouted desperately. Finding 2 people in a region of land some 40 million acres in size was basically searching for a needle in the ocean. Qiu Qiu continued, look on the bright side, perhaps they landed on the 9th level. Li Jinglong had already prepared himself for the worst. After all, of all of the possibilities, he would always encounter the most unfortunate of them. Yangtze will also find a way up to the 9th level, right? Lu Su asked. So all we need to do is. You can't depend on him to do that, Qiu Qiu said. He's never gone anywhere below the 7th level. Everyone. Not only him, even I haven't gone there. Qiu Qiu said. Everyone fell silent for a long while, before Li Jinglong asked, what about the passage of time in the tower? How's that currently? It's hard to say, Qiu Qiu said. The last time Yangtze went in, 1 day in the tower was equivalent to more than a month outside, about 40 days. This will depend on how effective the power of Yeming's soul still is, and right now, I imagine, 1 day in the tower is probably about 1 month outside the tower. Li Jinglong looked towards the gathered group and said, if this drags out, there may be changes. En Lushan is still in Fanyang and may move at any time. I will head into the tower right away. Chu frowned deeply, once again falling silent. Morajin finally said, Senior, if you have anything to say, you might as well say it all in one go. Li Jinglong startled at that, and Chu sighed. Ever since Xiaoyu stole Yeming's corpse, the passageways from the 8th level down to the 2nd have all been opened. Many of the Jiao that want to escape have flooded to the 9th level. I'm afraid that if you go in on your own, you will fall prey to their group assault. Ashina Kyung asked doubtfully, then how did you all go in and out? When Yeming was still here, the dragon-subduing saint could enter and leave as they pleased, Chu said. After Yeming died, as the power of his souls weakened, the Jiao had already started to attack me. 20 years ago, when I went inside to take Yangtze out, we managed to beat a hasty retreat. Wait, Lu Su didn't quite understand. What are you talking about? Li Jinglong glanced at him, indicating that he shouldn't pry. He fell silent for a moment, before keenly realizing the crux of a specific issue. Do the Jiao and dragons in the tower not attack Yangtze? Li Jinglong asked. Admiration shone in Chu's eyes, and he nodded. He was born in the tower and at that time, he was a child. The Jiao and dragons may have purposefully overlooked him, to not go as far as to kill all of them. Everyone seemed to have understood something, but they all remained silent. Chu said, if you go into the 9th level and Yangtze and Hung Jun are not there, you may find yourself encircled. Li Jinglong was basically completely at a loss for what to do. Xiaoyu's plan this time really depended on coincidence itself, yet had turned out to be completely flawless. The ring of the sacred flame currently rests on Li Guinayan's hand, Li Jinglong suddenly said, looking towards Atai. Atai nodded. I gave it to him before we left. Li Jinglong, are you sure? Very sure, Atai replied. When they had left Chang'an, Li Jinglong had made 2 sets of preparations. Not only had he been on his guard for Xiaoyu following them down to Hangzhou, he had also been on guard for Xiaoyu to slaughter his way back into Chang'an after the exorcism department left. That was why he had left Li Guinayan, a relative outsider, in Chang'an. He would remain hidden, and if Xiaoyu dared to show himself, he would set their arrangements into motion. But now, the danger outside the tower was no longer Xiaoyu, if only because entering the tower to find the people in question and leaving it would require 3 to 6 months, and Li Jinglong was most worried about Lushan. If he tried to do something during this time, and all the members of the exorcism department were in the tower, they would have no way to fend him off. This was an extremely difficult decision. Li Jinglong reconsidered again and again, before looking at the rest of them. Lu Su's power over dreams can fend off Mara, Li Jinglong said. Though compared to the heart lamp, it is not as strong, it will have somewhat of an effect. Morajin said. Lu Su and I will stand guard outside. Tu Raindik said, I will return to Chang'an. At least that way I can help pass some information on to you all. Li Jinglong glanced at Atai and Tu Raindik again and thought for a moment, before saying, Atai, remain outside the tower and coordinate with them. Ashina Kyan will enter the tower with me. We'll split up just like this. Everyone, make the best use of your time, let's move out. End chapter. Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 130. The Protector of the Exorcism Department. In the dragon-subduing tower. Hung Jun pressed himself against the ice as he slid left and right, sending Chu Yangtze swinging in an arc. At the same time, the bottle by Chu Yangtze's chest had also reached its tipping point. Go! Hung Jun shouted, before borrowing the arc of the last swing to pull the glaive out of the crack. He flew through the air, leaping with Chu Yangtze in tow towards the protruding bit of cliff in the distance as he let out an uncontrolled shout. Right after, as his arm swung, he stabbed the glaive horizontally into the opposite cliffside. With a whang, the tip of the glaive embedded itself into the rock face, but no deeper than 3 kun in. The entire blade rang with the impact as it held Hung Jun and Qiu Yangxi in place, violently bouncing up and down. That violent shaking almost made Hung Jun bite his tongue, and the glass bottle at Qiu Yangxi's chest also finally went flying. It first flew into the air, up and away, before passing by in front of Hung Jun's face. "Hung Jun, what's that?" But the moment that he realized that that was the bottle with the dragon ashes, the bottle had already reached the peak of its arc and had begun to plummet. Hung Jun, ah! Never mind him not being able to catch it in time. Even if he had reacted in time, he wouldn't have had the hands needed to catch it. If he wanted to catch it with his left hand, he had to let go of the glaive for a brief moment. If he caught it with his right, he had to let go of Qiu Yangxi. In the blink of an eye, that glass bottle winked as it caught the light, plummeting towards the abyss below. Hung Jun turned his head, his brain going completely blank. Instantly, a hand shot out and grabbed the bottle out of the air. "Heavens! What are you doing, Hung Jun?" Qiu Yangxi yelled, seemingly at the end of his rope. Hung Jun said in reply, "Heavens, you're finally awake." Qiu Yangxi looked down below his feet and immediately began to yell again. He looked up and asked, "Where is this? How am I supposed to know?" Hung Jun asked. "Stop asking." Qiu Yangxi grabbed at Hung Jun's arm as he kicked and scrambled to climb up. Hung Jun couldn't hold out, and he roared angrily, "Stop moving! Hang there obediently." The bottle almost smashed. Qiu Yangxi said, "If it fell, we'd be done for." Hung Jun looked to one side, searching for somewhere new for them to land, before saying, "I'll toss you over there. There's a cliff edge there." There was a faintly visible crack in the mountain of ice. Qiu Yangxi hurriedly shouted, "I can't climb up that. Stop wasting time with this nonsense." Hung Jun's arms were about to give up, and with a few swings, he sent Qiu Yangxi's entire body flying. Qiu Yangxi almost fell off the cliff, but at the very last moment, he managed to plaster himself against the edge of the cliff and find firm footing. With one less burden, Hung Jun finally let out a breath in relief. He then leaped across a distance of almost a jang, but because his strength had been sapped, he almost fell down. Qiu Yangxi hurriedly dragged him up onto the ledge. It would be easy now that they had somewhere to place their feet. Hung Jun separated the glaive out again, before calling on the throwing knife of blazing flames. "Don't move," Qiu Yangxi immediately said. But Qiu Yangxi's warning came one step too late. Hung Jun had already melted the huge rock that was stuck in the crack, and a chunk of ice as large as a small mountain went crashing down with a boom. "Hung Jun!" From the distance came a faint dragon's roar. Qiu Yangxi said, "Damn, who knows which one of the Jiao has woken?" Hung Jun glanced at Qiu Yangxi but did not say anything. Suddenly, this still world of ice seemed to have come to life, and a wind began to blow slowly, sweeping up ice and snow as it went. It gusted past the peak of that icy mountain, whistling as it funneled in. Such a strong wind! Hung Jun almost couldn't catch his breath from how hard the wind was blowing. Qiu Yangxi said, "Let's hurry away." The two of them squeezed through the crack, only to see that above them was an icy cavern sparkling with blue light, and when they went in even further, there seemed to be a bit of light up ahead. A crevasse appeared amidst the ice, and Qiu Yangxi first climbed up using both hands and feet, before pulling Hung Jun up with him. "Where is this?" Hung Jun asked, his face set in an expression of confusion. The two of them were standing on a mountain slope covered in snow and ice. In the distance was a lone peak, and above the peak, a beam of blue light shot towards the heavens. "The hell of cruel cold," Qiu Yangxi said. "The second level of the dragon subduing tower. When we entered the tower, the teleportation array had a small problem, and it sent us to the bottom. Thankfully we aren't on the very bottom level." "Oh," Hung Jun said. "Then how are we supposed to get out?" "That beam of blue light should be the array up to the third level," Qiu Yangxi murmured after Yeming died. Xiaoyu opened up each layer, one at a time. The Jiao that were trapped in the hell of cruel cold must have all escaped upwards. We must go to the 9th level, and only after repairing the barrier will we be able to leave. Then let's go, Hung Jun said, turning and starting to walk in front. Qiu Yangxi sighed. Let's rest for a bit. Are you tired? Hung Jun continued onwards, ducking his head. Qiu Yangxi looked over at him before catching up. His boots sank into the snow, and each step left behind a deep indent as he shouted, "We have to find another way over there." Hung Jun glanced back at him, and said in reply, "Then you go find one. Stop walking. Wait." Qiu Yangxi studied that beam of blue light at the summit of the mountain. There were several dragons circling and coiling around the pillar of light, and they looked like small dots that weren't very clearly distinguishable. Hung Jun did not reply, instead looking out into the distance. Qiu Yangxi, Hung Jun. Hung Jun. Qiu Yangxi, what's wrong? Hung Jun did not make a sound. Qiu Yangxi, are you angry? What's wrong? Hung Jun, I'm not. Qiu Yangxi asked, what exactly is wrong? What do you think? Hung Jun shouted at Qiu Yangxi, enraged. Do you know how dangerous that was just now? It was already very hard to keep you alive. Yet you're blaming me for not taking good care of that damned bottle of yours. Qiu Yangxi realized that just now, the words he had hazily uttered a while ago upon waking had all come directly from his subconscious. Though he didn't know what had happened before they had been dangling in midair, the situation just then had indeed been very precarious. He hurriedly apologized to Hung Jun. Sorry, that was my fault. Hung Jun's face was still dark with anger, and he ignored Qiu Yangxi, continuing along. Qiu Yangxi smiled at him and said, should I kowtow to you? Come here and beat me up to help with your anger, ba. No need, Hung Jun said bad-temperedly. Zhenji will definitely come to save me, so you can just continue to stay in this tower. Qiu Yangxi said, then when we see Jinglong, how about I let him beat me up to get rid of some of his anger? Hung Jun's unhappiness left as quickly as it came, and he asked, if they come in, will they also end up here? If Li Jinglong and Lu Su came together, Lu Su could fly when he took the form of the white deer, so that would be a bit safer. Even with that, that would still be a mad scramble. No, Qiu Yangxi said. My grandpa will send them right to the 9th level. If they can avoid the attacks of the Jiao horde, then they will begin to search level by level. All we need to do is head to the passageway and wait there. Hung Jun. Why are your feet bare? When Qiu Yangxi approached, he saw that not only had Hung Jun's feet been bare this entire time, he was also wearing nothing more than the summer clothing he had on when they entered. He said, let me give you my boots to wear. Hung Jun looked up into the distance, before saying, I'm not cold. Let's go. But as soon as Hung Jun cast a spell, the sound of a dragon's roar came from the distance again. It seemed to be coming from a different direction than the magic that was shooting the beam of blue light up into the sky. Subconsciously, Hung Jun moved to dodge away, but Qiu Yangxi turned to where the dragon roar had come from. Hung Jun asked, the Jiao in this tower won't all be as hard to deal with as Xiaoyu was, will they? They're all even harder to deal with than him, Qiu Yangxi murmured. But I imagine that all of the hard to deal with ones have gone up. Come with me, Hung Jun. And saying this, Qiu Yangxi gestured for Hung Jun to follow behind him. Hung Jun asked, to seek out our deaths. Qiu Yangxi chuckled. I have to make sure you stay fine and hand you over to Zhenji in one piece, otherwise I'll be the one dying. The snowstorm grew stronger and stronger, and Qiu Yangxi went in front, taking its force head on, while Hung Jun followed behind him, letting him carve out a path for them. The two of them slowly walked towards the forest covered in white snow in the distance. Qiu Yangxi was so cold that he was shivering, but Hung Jun followed behind him like he wasn't affected at all. Qiu Yangxi remarked, It's so cold. Hung Jun, are you not afraid of the cold at all? Expressionlessly, Hung Jun pulled out a phoenix plume from his inside pocket. Chu Yangxi. Chu Yangxi backed up a little, doing his best to stand right next to Hung Jun. The two of them pressed forward with great difficulty. The phoenix feather could ward off the cold, but it could not keep the wind out, and it was only after they entered the pine forest that the wind gradually died off. Prepare yourselves, Chu Chu said. I'll send you in right away. This one trip will take at least a good half a month, Mo Rijin said. Lu Su replied, don't be dejected. Who knows, maybe they're waiting on the 9th level. Li Jinglong and Ashina Kyang stood in the middle of the teleportation array, and the other four watched them. Tu Rainduk said, worried, be careful. Li Jinglong replied, we will, don't worry. Ashina Kyang, sister-in-law is talking to me, why are you making this out to be about you? It's not like she's on friendly terms with you. Li Jinglong. Atai said, then, let's all act according to the plan. Li Jinglong nodded. Chu Chu began to recite the incantation, and a blue light slowly swelled from the array, glowing brightly. Mo Rijin said, this will be the first time without Zenshi, and we don't know how long this will last. You'll be able to do it, Atai said, patting Mo Rijin's shoulder. Mo Rijin will be promoted to the protector of the exorcism department, Li Jinglong said from within the teleportation array, as the blue light grew more intense. You will temporarily be given the official seal. It's all up to you now. And with that, the seal of the Marquis of Yadan and the seal of the exorcism department came shooting out towards him like comets. No way. Ashina Kyang in the array and Lu Su and Atai outside all raised their voices in protest. He's being promoted just like that. Mo Rijin was helpless to protest, and he simply chuckled. He caught the seals with his left hand, while he put two fingers to his forehead in a salute as he bid farewell to Li Jinglong. Once I get out, let's drink another cup. Li Jinglong called distantly. The vast seas become mulberry fields, and the stars change in their positions. Chu Chu spread his arms, and the power in the array peaked. He roared, go. From the array, a beam of blue light burst forth and shot into the sky. Instantly, Li Jinglong and Ashina Kyang vanished within the pillar of light. But in the next instant, before the blue light extinguished, a black Jiao once again appeared, charging out of the array. Green blood seeped forth from all over its body, and the array exploded outwards with energy, instantly flattening the entirety of the garden. Mo Rijin's face changed, and he bellowed, chase it. At almost the same time, Lu Su transformed into the white deer, while Atai waved his fan. Mo Rijin leapt onto the white deer's back, and they went racing through the air after the black Xiao. Xiaoyu roared wildly as the scales all across his body split off, leaving behind splotches of blood. Green blood spurted forth in an arc, while Mo Rijin's 7-nailed arrows followed closely behind. Before the group even had the chance to think, Xiaoyu charged into the layer of clouds above, and its huge, black body writhed amongst the clouds before it plummeted, shrieking, towards the ground below. The three exorcists were following closely behind, and with a sharp plunge, they charged downwards after the black Xiao. But the change happened suddenly, and countless thoughts flashed through Mo Rijin's brain. This was the second time that they had fallen for its tricks. Xiaoyu plummeted towards the ground, and suddenly, several real dragons, each colored differently from the next, flew towards them. Right after that, the Kylin, the Phoenix, and all sorts of divine beasts transformed into streaks as they raced along. From the faraway flowing clouds mountain villa, Chu Chu kept chanting an incantation, and divine beast after divine beast flew out of the villa, trapping Xiaoyu amidst them. But Xiaoyu did not dodge or flinch away at all. Even though the divine beasts that had been summoned by magic had sunk their teeth in all over its body, it plummeted towards the west lake, sending up a huge wave that swept towards the banks. Its green blood dispersed in the water as it swiftly sank. Qiu Qiu and Turanduk raced out of the mountain villa, only to see the grey wolf, the white deer, and Atai standing by the bank of the west lake, staring at the roiling surface of the water. It escaped again, the grey wolf roared angrily. White light flashed, and in the air, it formed a rapidly spinning wheel of light, spitting Li Jinglong and Ashina Qiang out. The two of them couldn't help shouting loudly as they fell from a height of 1 zhang. In midair, Li Jinglong somersaulted, and with the sword of wisdom in his hand, he landed firmly on the ground. Ashina Qiang skidded along, before standing firm. The sky was dark, and the land was empty and barren. All around them were thorns, and in the middle was a tall tower reaching for the heavens. Everywhere that they could see, the dragons' roars rose and fell, and hundreds of thousands of Jiao dragons appeared, circling around the tower. The Jiaos were enveloped in the black qi that also filled the air, and they looked like a swirling vortex of black clouds. And just at the instant that the teleportation array appeared at a low altitude, the Jiao horde had discovered the change, and they rushed towards Li Jinglong and Ashina Qiang in a cloud as dense as a school of carp swimming down the river. "Motherfucker," Ashina Qiang said dumbly. What is going on?" Li Jinglong only paused for a brief second before issuing an order. "Run." In the snowy forest, the sky gradually darkened. Qiu Yangxi and Hung Jun sat under a tree, and the light snow danced around them. The two of them sat cross-legged on the ground, warming themselves thanks to the phoenix plume that had been placed on top of a rock. The snow around where they were sitting had already melted, and Qiu Yangxi had spread his cloak out on the ground for Hung Jun to sit on. "Is it that cold?" Hung Jun asked. "I'm a southerner." Qiu Yangxi bemoaned. "I didn't see you so afraid of the cold last time we were in Dunhuang either," Hung Jun said. "That's because I knew we were going to Dunhuang, so I wore a whole bunch of clothes, and I even brought an artifact with me," Qiu Yangxi said. Hung Jun rubbed his hands together before studying Qiu Yangxi, suddenly feeling that he was pretty amusing as well. He was clearly wearing the armor of the dragon-subduing saint, which made him look like a divine soldier, yet he was still so cowardly. "Are you still mad?" Qiu Yangxi asked. "Not anymore," Hung Jun replied shortly. Qiu Yangxi thought for a moment, before saying, "Hung Jun, let me say something. Either way, Zhenji isn't here, so he won't beat me up." "What do you want to say?" Hung Jun watched Qiu Yangxi warily. "I don't mean that." Qiu Yangxi hurried to protest. "I like girls, pretty girls, cute girls, girls who understand others." Hung Jun knew that Qiu Yangxi often went to Pinkongli with Atai, but though he was always smiling usually, he very rarely overstepped people's bounds. He looked after Hung Jun and Lu Su pretty well, and he would ask them about their feelings even if there wasn't any real reason to. This was something that their other companions in the exorcism department wouldn't do. But there was always an if. Mo Rijin had also said that he wasn't able to get hard because of Lu Su, so who knows if Qiu Yangxi would change his tune with a single sentence. Hung Jun needed to be on guard. "I'm serious," Qiu Yangxi said. "Hung Jun, thank you and sorry." Hung Jun wailed, "If you want to thank me, then hurry up and figure out a way to get out of here." Qiu Yangxi hurried to placate him by telling him he would, and Hung Jun added, "1 day inside is 1 year outside." Qiu Yangxi replied, "It's not that long anymore. Half a day in here is no more than 20 days outside." Hung Jun said, if Zhenji had to wait for a whole 10 days, he would go mad anyways. Qiu Yangxi replied, That's right. I will be as fast as I can, believe me." Saying that, he grew a little dejected again, and he said, self-deprecatingly, "You have someone waiting for you to get out. You're not like me." When Hung Jun heard these words, his heart began to ache. Either way, he didn't really know what to say to that, so he simply said, "Don't say that, Yangxiga. We prefer to have you there." Qiu Yangxi studied Hung Jun, and he smiled a bit, before saying, that's why, thank you, Hung Jun. The two of them sat in front of the rock and exchanged a quiet glance. Hung Jun began to smile as well, and he said, "You're welcome, Yang Siga." End chapter.